In the summer of 1934, a construction crew digging the foundation for a new irrigation canal outside Miamisburg, Ohio, struck something solid at 11 feet below grade. They stopped the machinery. Foreman Roy Dickens climbed down into the trench himself. What he found there was a femur, a single thigh bone, that measured 4 feet and 2 inches from joint to joint. The crew called the county. The county called the state historical office, and within 48 hours, a team from the Ohio State Archaeological and Historical Society was on site, excavating what they described in their own internal memo, a memo that still exists in the State Archive in Columbus, as a human skeleton of extraordinary proportions, estimated at 16 feet in total length. That skeleton was transported to the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History on a flatbed truck on August 17, 1934. By August 24th, the following week, every record of its physical presence in that building had been removed from the museum's inventory log. The skeleton itself was gone. That is not a rumor. That is not an internet legend. That is what the documents say. I want to tell you exactly what I found, and more importantly, what was there before someone decided it shouldn't be. The excavation at Miamisburg didn't happen in a vacuum. Ohio's Great Miami River Valley had been producing anomalous skeletal finds since at least the 1840s. The Smithsonian Institution Annual Report from 1873, available in digitized form through the Smithsonian Library's archive, contains a section titled Mound Explorations, authored by Cyrus Thomas, the chief archaeologist for the Bureau of Ethnology. Thomas documented 17 instances of skeletal remains from Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois mound sites that exceeded 7 feet in height. 17. In a single government report. He described them without significant commentary, the way you describe something that isn't yet inconvenient. That changes after 1910. Before 1910, newspaper accounts of oversized skeletal finds appear regularly in the historical press. The Worthington Advance, the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Columbus Dispatch, all carried items about unusual excavations with the matter-of-fact tone of local news. A find near Newark, Ohio in 1885, reported in the Licking County Gazette. Workmen grading a hillside have uncovered a burial of unusual character, the skeleton being that of a man of gigantic frame, measuring in excess of 8 feet. The article is 16 lines long. It sits next to a notice about a county fair. After 1910, those items disappear from the mainstream press almost entirely. Roy Dickens filed a 2-page incident report the day the Miamisburg skeleton was found. That report was sent to the Ohio State Archaeological and Historical Society, which is now the Ohio History Connection. The Ohio History Connection maintains a searchable archive. I searched it. The Dickens report is not there. What is there is a corresponding internal memo from August 1934, 3 pages, that references the find and its transport to Cincinnati. It references the Dickens report by its case number, but the Dickens report itself, Case File 34081M, does not exist in the archive as a retrievable document. It is listed. It has a number. The number leads nowhere. That is a specific kind of absence, not the absence of something that never existed, the absence of something that was indexed and then removed. The Cincinnati Museum of Natural History's acquisition logs for August 1934 were photographed by a local historian named Harold Weston in 1971 before a flood damaged portions of the museum's basement storage. Weston's photographs, which he donated to the Cincinnati Historical Society before his death in 1988, show the acquisition log for that period. Page 34 of the log, dated August 17, 1934, contains an entry for a large ossified remains, male, provenance Miamisburg, OH. The entry is assigned an accession number, 1934-0817-LG. The next page of the log, page 35, has been physically removed. You can see the torn edge in Weston's photograph. Page 36 picks up with September entries. Whatever was on page 35 is gone, and has been gone since before 1971, when Weston took the picture. The accession number 1934-0817-LG does not appear in any subsequent inventory of the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History. Now here is where the arithmetic stops working. The Ohio State Archaeological and Historical Society dispatched a team of 4 researchers to the Miamisburg site in August 1934. Their travel expenses were reimbursed through a state expenditure ledger. These ledgers are public record, held by the Ohio State Archives. The ledger shows reimbursements for a 4-day excavation, transport of materials, and, this is the part that stops me, crating fees. The crating fees are itemized. They cover 3 wooden crates, the largest measuring 7 feet by 4 feet by 3 feet. That is a specific crate. That is not a crate you build for a normal-sized skeleton. That crate is built for something that requires specialized containment. The state paid for that crate. The state paid to transport that crate, and then whatever was in that crate stopped existing in any official record. The excavation crew at Miamisburg included a man named Albert Hoskins, who worked for the Montgomery County Road Authority. Hoskins kept a personal diary. His grandson donated it to the Dayton Metro Library's local history collection in 2003. The diary entry for August 14, 1934, 2 days before the state team arrived, reads, "The thing they found in the canal ditch is not like anything from around here. Roy said the skull alone is the size of a rain barrel. None of us have said much about it since. Felt wrong to say much about it." 3 days later, after the state team arrived, Hoskins wrote, "They came with trucks and crates and very little talk. They thanked us and told us there was nothing unusual to report." I wrote that down because it seemed like an unusual thing to say. Albert Hoskins died in 1967. His grandson has never been contacted by any researcher before the Dayton Metro Library cataloged the diary in 2019. That diary sat in a donation box for 16 years. If you've made it this far, you already know you're not the kind of person who accepts the first explanation given. There are more investigations like this one coming, and if you want to be there when they surface, subscribing is the only way to make sure you don't miss them. This channel exists for people who read the receipts. The Miamisburg find was not the first time the state of Ohio encountered this particular administrative problem. In 1879, a group of amateur excavators working a mound near Chillicothe, one of the most archaeologically rich corridors in North America, sent a letter to the Smithsonian describing remains they had uncovered. The letter is in the Smithsonian's Division of Physical Anthropology Correspondence Archive. The reply, from a Smithsonian administrator named Spencer Byrd, is also in the archive. Byrd's reply is polite and brief. He thanks the excavators for their interest, tells them that a representative will be sent to assess the find, and advises them not to disturb the site further. In the margin of Byrd's file copy of that letter, a file copy, someone has written 2 words in pencil. The handwriting has never been attributed. The 2 words are in collect and close. Collect and close. The Smithsonian's own records show that a representative was indeed dispatched to Chillicothe in March 1880. The representative's name was Frederick Ward Putnam, one of the most distinguished archaeologists of the 19th century, Harvard's Peabody Museum curator, a man whose field notes fill hundreds of archive boxes. His notes for the March 1880 Chillicothe visit contain 2 pages. 2 pages for a multi-day expedition. His average field report from that era runs between 12 and 40 pages. The 2 Chillicothe pages describe the weather and the landscape. They describe lunch. They do not describe what was in the mound. In the same period, the Smithsonian was actively cataloging human remains from across the continent under the Mound Survey Project, a federally funded effort that ran from 1882 to 1894 and produced detailed reports on thousands of sites. Cyrus Thomas's final report from that project, published in 1894, runs to 742 pages. I read the relevant sections. The oversized finds that appeared in his 1873 report, the 17 instances, are not in the 1894 report. They are not rebutted. They are not explained. They are simply absent. 12 years of federally funded archaeology produced a 742-page document in which the anomalies from the earlier document were silently erased. The Ohio mounds are a specific problem in this story because of their scale. The Miamisburg mound, not the excavation site, the mound itself, which stands nearby, is the largest conical earthwork in North America. 68 feet high, 800 feet in circumference at its base. The volume of earth moved to construct it has been calculated at 311,000 cubic feet. Archaeologists date its construction to somewhere between 800 BCE and 100 CE, attributing it to the Adena culture. The Adena people, by the skeletal evidence that has been formally studied, were not unusually large. The Adena people built structures that were unusually large. That distinction appears in the academic literature and then stops being discussed. There is a paper published in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology in 1940, 6 years after the Miamisburg excavation, titled Anomalous Skeletal Proportions in Ohio Valley Mound Populations. The paper was authored by a physical anthropologist at Ohio State University named Dr. Clarence Marsh. It was published, it was indexed, it appeared in the journal, and then it was never cited. Not once in the subsequent 80 years of anthropological literature has a peer-reviewed paper cited the Marsh 1940 article, a published, indexed, peer-reviewed article in a major journal, sitting in the academic record for 84 years, with 0 citations. The statistical probability of that outcome for a paper in an active research area is so low that several bibliometric databases flag it as an anomaly in their citation tracking systems. I contacted the Ohio State University Department of Anthropology in 2023 to ask about Dr. Clarence Marsh. His faculty file, which would contain his correspondence, his research notes, his tenure documentation, is listed in the university archive as restricted, indefinite hold. The archive staff could not tell me who placed the restriction or when it was placed, only that it was there. Now here is what I want you to think about, and I want to be specific. In 1906, the Congress of the United States passed the Antiquities Act. This law gave the federal government authority over archaeological sites on federal lands and established the legal framework for institutions like the Smithsonian to control the disposition of excavated materials. In 1906, the Smithsonian received formal authority over what happens to what gets found in the ground. The transition from the era in which anomalous skeletal finds were casually reported in county newspapers to the era in which they essentially stopped being reported in any newspaper at all. That transition is not gradual. It happens within 5 years of 1906. The Worthington Advance, which had carried skeletal find reports since the 1870s, stops carrying them after 1909. The Licking County Gazette stops after 1911. The Columbus Dispatch stops after 1908. I am not telling you that the Antiquities Act was designed to suppress specific archaeological finds. The documents do not say that. What the documents say is that the act was passed, that administrative authority over archaeological materials was centralized, and that the public record of anomalous finds stopped shortly afterward. The sequence is there. The mechanism is not in the documents. That is where the paper trail ends. There was a man in Miamisburg named George Fulton who ran a general store 1 block from where the irrigation canal was being dug in 1934. Fulton's store ledger, a commercial sales record, not a personal diary, was preserved by his family and donated to the Dayton Metro Library alongside the Hoskins diary as part of the same 2003 donation. In the store ledger for August 16, 1934, the day before the state team arrived to transport the skeleton, there is an entry for a sale of 40 pounds of ice. The notation next to the entry reads, "Sold to the county crew at the Big Ditch for the bones they found. 40 pounds of ice. Sold to preserve something that the county crew believed was worth preserving overnight before the state arrived." George Fulton was 61 years old in 1934. He had run his store in Miamisburg since 1908. He died in 1952. In his store ledger, the ice sale is one line item among dozens. He didn't editorialize, he didn't dramatize, he just wrote down what he sold, to whom, and what it was for. That is the most credible kind of document there is. A commercial record with no reason to lie. 40 pounds of ice, sold to keep something cold before the state arrived to take it away. The bones they found. I want to know something, and I want you to be specific when you answer. The next time you're in a county archive, a library basement, or a historical society reading room, or if you already work with local historical records, look for the gap pattern I described in this video, not the missing documents themselves. Look for the indexed entries that lead nowhere, case numbers with no files behind them, accession numbers that don't appear in later inventories, named documents referenced in surviving correspondence that are themselves absent. That pattern has a shape, and I want to know how many of you have seen that shape before. In whatever archive you've worked in, whatever county, whatever state. Tell me specifically what you found indexed but absent. That information changes the scope of this investigation significantly. After the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History quietly closed its records on accession number 1934-0817 LG, The Miamisburg site was quietly reclassified in the county's infrastructure documentation as a routine geological disturbance. The canal project continued. The site was not formally designated as an archaeological zone. No protective order was placed on the surrounding soil. By 1937, the irrigation infrastructure had been completed, and the entire area was built over. The field where Roy Dickens climbed down into the trench in August 1934 is now a parking lot. The crate, the 7-foot crate that the state of Ohio paid to build and transport, went somewhere. Institutional materials don't disappear. They get transferred. They get accessioned under different numbers. They get moved to storage facilities that are themselves not publicly indexed. The Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History maintains approximately 34,000 square feet of collections storage that is not open to public access or public inventory review. That is not a secret. It is stated in the museum's own administrative documentation. What is stored in those 34,000 square feet is not publicly listed. The museum's policy, as stated in its collections management guidelines, is that physical access to non-exhibited materials requires an institutional affiliation and a specific research justification. The bones are somewhere. Institutional materials don't dissolve. They get reclassified. The archive in Columbus still lists case file 34081M. The number is still there. The file behind it is not. Somewhere, in a crate that was built to specific and unusual dimensions, in a storage facility that publishes no inventory, the answer to what Roy Dickens found at 11 feet below the surface of an Ohio field in August 1934 is sitting in the dark. It has been sitting there for 90 years, and the people willing to read what the ledgers actually say are the only ones who will ever understand what was moved and why and where it went. The records exist. The crate still has a number, and the people willing to follow the numbers are the only ones who will ever find out what was inside it. Subscribe, because the next investigation gets closer to it than this one did.